Welcome back. Glad to have you here. Tonight, an empire will celebrate the disappearance of humanity's greatest warships without asking the one question that matters most. Where did they go? Here's how it happened. The first human warship vanished from the fleet registry at 0317 Galactic Standard Time. Admiral Serac Val watched its identification marker disappear from the tactical wall of the Dominion command carrier, unquestioned law. One moment, the blue symbol of the human dreadnought TFS Resolute occupied the center of the Narith Passage. The next, its registry code dissolved into static, leaving nothing behind but an empty column and a single administrative notation. Vessel status. Missing. Serac leaned closer to the display. His tall plated body remained perfectly still, but the narrow sensory crests along his jaw lifted in suspicion. The Resolute had not exploded. There had been no radiation bloom, no debris field, no distress transmission, and no gravitational distortion consistent with an emergency jump. The ship had simply ceased to exist according to the system that tracked every registered military vessel across 847 inhabited star systems. Around him, the command deck of the unquestioned law remained quiet. 200 officers occupied tiered control stations beneath a ceiling of black crystal. Every surface reflected the golden insignia of the Varithi Dominion, an unbroken circle around a downward-pointing spear. For 3,000 years, that symbol had meant the same thing. Nothing escaped Dominion observation. Nothing maneuvered without permission. Nothing disappeared. Registry Overseer Thal Orek approached the Admiral with deliberate steps. His uniform carried the silver bands of the Imperial Record Ministry, an institution older than several spacefaring civilizations. "Admiral, the Resolute has been removed from all active position tables," Thal reported. "The Central Registry cannot locate its drive signature." Serac turned one dark eye toward him. "Removed by whom?" "No authorization was issued." "Then locate the error." Thal hesitated. "It does not appear to be an error." The tactical wall shifted as a second blue marker vanished. TFS Vanguard. Another line appeared beneath the first. Vessel status. Missing. Then a third. TFS Indomitable. Then a fourth. TFS Dawnkeeper. Across the Narith Passage, human warships began disappearing one by one. They did not break formation. They did not accelerate. They did not fire. They simply ceased to appear on the Dominion screens. Within 11 minutes, 600 human capital ships had vanished from the fleet registry. Within 23 minutes, that number had reached 2,400. By the end of the hour, the entire Terran expeditionary fleet was listed as missing. Admiral Serac Val stared at an empty tactical wall where the largest human naval formation ever assembled had been displayed moments before. Behind him, an officer whispered that the humans had fled. Serac heard him. He did not correct him. Because somewhere beneath the certainty that had guided his species for thousands of years, the Admiral felt the first cold pressure of doubt. Humanity had not fled. Fleeing left a trail. The Varithi Dominion had built its empire on the belief that war was not won by courage, weapons, or numbers. War was won by information. Every Varithi child learned the doctrine of perfect position before learning the names of distant stars. The doctrine taught that all conflict could be reduced to coordinates. If a commander knew where every vessel stood, where every supply ship traveled, where every enemy reserve waited, then victory became arithmetic. The doctrine had never failed. The Dominion's Central Fleet Registry was its greatest expression. For 1,200 years, every major civilization had been required to register the unique drive harmonics of its military vessels. The law had begun as a safety agreement after two passenger fleets collided during overlapping jump entries. Over centuries, the system had expanded until it tracked almost every warship in known space. The Dominion controlled the registry's architecture. Officially, this ensured peace. In practice, it gave the Varithi the location, direction, speed, mass, and operational readiness of every registered fleet. The Dominion always knew where its rivals were. Its rivals never knew how much the Dominion knew. Civilizations that resisted registration found their trade access restricted. Worlds that constructed unregistered warships were accused of preparing for aggression. Governments that challenged the Dominion's authority discovered Varithi fleets waiting along their borders before their own admirals had received deployment orders. The system did not merely record power, it defined which powers were allowed to move. Humanity had joined the Registry 41 years earlier. At the time, the Varithi had considered the new species unusually cooperative. Earth's diplomats provided complete drive profiles for every vessel in the Terran Defense Fleet. Human engineers allowed Registry inspectors aboard their shipyards. Their captains transmitted position updates without complaint. To the Dominion, such openness suggested weakness. Strong civilizations concealed, weak civilizations complied. The humans did not appear weak in the physical sense. Their vessels were dense, heavily armored, and built with a redundancy that Varithi engineers considered excessive. Their warships carried independent reactors, mechanical backups, and crews large enough to operate even after automated systems failed. But their strategic behavior seemed cautious. Humanity avoided territorial disputes. Human patrols escorted damaged foreign ships. Terran admirals frequently delayed exercises to prevent frightening civilian traffic. When border conflicts erupted between smaller powers, human vessels arrived carrying medical supplies before ammunition. The Varithi saw restraint and interpreted fear. They saw compassion and interpreted indecision. They saw transparency and assumed dependence. For 4 decades, the Dominion watched humanity's fleet grow while remaining chained to the Registry. Then the Varithi decided to test the chain. The Narith Passage connected the inner systems of the Terran Confederation to 12 frontier colonies. More than 40 billion tons of food, medicine, reactor fuel, and industrial material crossed the passage each year. 3 months earlier, Dominion Chancellor Valor Tan had declared the route subject to Varithi security inspection. Human diplomats objected. The Dominion ignored them. Human trade vessels were delayed, searched, and sometimes confiscated. Frontier hospitals began rationing medicine. 2 agricultural moons suspended atmospheric projects because their reactor components had been seized. Still, humanity did not fire. Chancellor Valor interpreted patience as proof. At a meeting of the Imperial Strategic Council, he proposed a final measure. The Dominion would close the Narith Passage entirely. If humanity accepted the closure, Earth would be forced to negotiate from weakness. If humanity deployed its fleet, the Registry would expose every movement before the first Terran ship reached the border. Admiral Sarek Val had supported the plan. He had studied human military history and found it chaotic. Their armies won impossible victories, yet often through improvisation, sacrifice, and actions that appeared reckless by Varithi standards. Humans celebrated commanders who disobeyed plans. They honored soldiers who acted without orders. They built legends around battles that should never have been fought. To Sarek, this confirmed that humanity lacked strategic discipline. Their fleet was powerful, but power without perfect information was only noise. When 2,400 Terran warships entered the Narith Passage, the Dominion was ready. The Varithi First Encirclement Fleet held the far end of the corridor with 7,000 vessels. Fortress platforms surrounded the passage exits. Sensor buoys tracked every known jump lane. Long-range weapons had already calculated firing solutions based on the Registry's live data. The humans would be visible at every moment. The Dominion would always remain one step ahead. Then the Terran fleet disappeared. Back aboard the human command ship TFS Resolute, Admiral Elena Ward watched the stars darken as the final Registry beacon shut down. There was no alarm, no celebration. The bridge crew continued working in the pale light of their consoles, while a soft mechanical vibration traveled through the deck. Captain Marcus Hale stood beside the navigation station, studying a display that no Dominion vessel could see. "Registry separation complete," he reported. "All task groups are operating on inertial navigation." Admiral Ward nodded. "Fleet synchronization? 2 milliseconds beyond target tolerance. Acceptable." Marcus looked toward the observation window. Beyond the armored glass, hundreds of human warships floated in precise formation, their hulls visible only as dark shapes against the distant stars. None of them transmitted active identification. None produced standard jump signatures. None remained connected to the Galactic Registry. The Terran Expeditionary Fleet had not vanished. It had gone silent. Humanity had spent 41 years studying the Fleet Registry. Earth's engineers quickly discovered that the system was more than a navigation network. It was a strategic surveillance architecture built around a simple assumption. Every advanced starship required a detectable drive signature. The assumption had been correct for almost every species. Most faster-than-light drives opened a controlled distortion ahead of a vessel and collapsed space behind it. The process produced a harmonic pattern as distinctive as a voice. Once recorded, that pattern could be tracked across extraordinary distances. Human drives worked the same way. At least, the drives humanity had shown the Registry inspectors did. 16 years earlier, a civilian research team at the Tycho Institute had developed an alternative method of interstellar movement. Instead of forcing a vessel through folded space, the system created thousands of microscopic gravitational adjustments around the hull. The ship did not jump, it fell. Not in one direction, but through a carefully calculated sequence of artificial slopes. Each distortion was too small to trigger long-range sensors. Combined, they allowed a vessel to travel faster than light without producing a conventional drive wake. The process was slower than a standard jump and required extraordinary computational precision. The Terran Navy had initially dismissed it as impractical. Then Commodore Daniel Okafor asked a question no engineer had considered. Could an entire fleet use it without being seen? The answer became Project Lantern. For 14 years, humanity fitted its largest warships with concealed gradient drives. Crews trained to navigate without registry assistance. Captains relearned stellar positioning methods that had been abandoned for centuries. Mechanical chronometers returned to command decks. Human navigators practiced calculating routes from pulsars, gravity wells, and the motion of distant galaxies. Every registered Terran vessel still carried a conventional drive. It also carried something the Dominion did not know existed. Admiral Ward had not wanted to reveal Project Lantern. Secrecy was not merely a weapon, it was a shield that could only be used once. But the frontier colonies were running out of time. The settlement of New Carthage had 9 days of medical isotopes remaining. The ice cities of Talos required replacement heat exchangers before their winter orbit. More than 60 million civilians depended on the Narith Passage. Humanity had attempted diplomacy, then arbitration, then economic pressure. The Dominion had interpreted every peaceful action as hesitation. So Earth authorized Operation Blindside. The name had been suggested by a young navigation lieutenant and immediately rejected by 3 committees for lacking dignity. Admiral Ward had approved it anyway. On the bridge of the Resolute, Chief Navigator Priya Nandakumar studied a 3-dimensional field of moving gravitational vectors. The Dominion fleet is holding position at the western exit, she said. Their attention remains focused on our last registered coordinates. How long until we clear the passage boundary? Ward asked. 6 hours. And after that? Priya enlarged the map. After that, we descend behind them. The phrase sounded almost casual. Behind them. 7,000 Dominion warships occupied a battle line spanning 4 million kilometers. Their forward weapons faced the Narith Passage. Their armor was reinforced along the bow. Their sensor arrays were concentrated ahead, watching for a human advance that the Registry insisted had disappeared. Their rear formations contained carriers, fuel vessels, repair platforms, ammunition ships, and command relays. Every doctrine had a blind spot. The doctrine of perfect position had one larger than most. It assumed that anything missing from the map could not be present on the battlefield. Admiral Ward turned to Marcus. Has the relief convoy entered silent transit? All 800 civilian vessels are following Task Group Orion. Any problems? One freighter lost gradient alignment for 4 seconds. The crew corrected it manually. Ward allowed herself the smallest smile. Good. The mission was not to destroy the Dominion fleet. It was to reopen the passage. The warships were there because sometimes peace required placing an unmistakable fact where an enemy could not ignore it. The civilian vessels were there because humanity intended to prove exactly what the passage was for. 6 hours later, the Terran fleet crossed the final Registry detection boundary. Every conventional drive remained cold. Every external light was dark. Across 2,400 warships, human crews spoke in low voices and watched clocks count down. The fleet moved through artificial gravity gradients that existed for fractions of a second. Each vessel descended across invisible contours in space, falling faster than light toward coordinates calculated days earlier. No single computer controlled the formation. No central beacon guided them. The Dominion could have detected either. Instead, each human ship navigated independently while sharing a schedule created before departure. Thousands of vessels adjusted course according to the same prearranged sequence, like musicians performing after the conductor had left the room. The maneuver demanded trust, not trust in software, trust in people. Aboard the cruiser TFS Ardent, Lieutenant Commander Sophia Reyes noticed a deviation in the local gravity model. A small rogue planet, undetected on official charts, had shifted the gradient field by less than 1/1,000,000th of a degree. At normal speeds, the difference would have been meaningless. During silent transit, it threatened to scatter 300 ships across half a solar system. Sophia did not request guidance from the Resolute. Transmitting would reveal the fleet. She calculated the correction with her navigation team, flashed the solution through a narrow laser link to the surrounding vessels, and adjusted course. One by one, other captains accepted the change. No vote, no debate, no central order. Just hundreds of human crews recognizing a problem and solving it together. The fleet curved around the rogue world, formation spacing shifted by less than 20 kilometers. The Dominion detected nothing. Meanwhile, aboard the Unquestioned Law, confidence had begun returning to the command deck. Registry Overseer Thal Oric presented his conclusions to Admiral Sarek. The Terran vessels had severed their registry connections, he explained. Without live synchronization, their jump systems would lack navigational correction. They may have attempted an emergency retreat. Sarek studied the empty tactical wall. May have. The data permits several possibilities. List them. Thal's throat plates tightened. Fleet-wide drive failure. Coordinated registry sabotage. Uncontrolled displacement. Destruction by an unknown spatial event. Retreat? Sarek asked. Also possible. The Admiral looked toward the forward display, where the Nereth Passage opened between two violet stars. The humans had been advancing in a stable formation. Then they were gone. A fleet-wide mechanical failure would not erase 2,400 ships at the same instant. An uncontrolled displacement would leave gravitational turbulence. Destruction would leave energy. Only sabotage fit the evidence. But sabotage of what? The Registry or the Dominion's certainty? A communications officer rose from her station. Admiral, Chancellor Valor is requesting a report. Place him on the central display. The golden insignia vanished, replaced by the narrow face of the Dominion's supreme political leader. Chancellor Valor Tan had never served aboard a warship. He had built his authority through trade law, information control, and the quiet destruction of rivals who moved before securing permission. Have the humans withdrawn? Valor asked. Their fleet is no longer visible to the Registry, Sarek replied. Then they have withdrawn. That conclusion is not confirmed. The Chancellor's expression hardened. Admiral, 2,400 capital ships do not cease to exist. That is precisely the concern. Valor leaned toward the transmission lens. The Registry lists them as missing. Their allies see the same status. Their government will be forced to explain the disappearance of its entire expeditionary fleet. We have achieved victory without firing. Sarek's jaw crests lifted. A missing fleet is not necessarily a defeated fleet. It is no longer in the passage. We do not know that. We know where it is not, Valor said. In war, that is often enough. Sarek looked again at the empty screen. For the first time in his career, he wondered whether his civilization's greatest instrument had taught them to confuse a lack of information with information itself. Chancellor, he said, I recommend repositioning our rear security groups. Against what? Against the possibility that the humans are still maneuvering. Without registered drives? Yes. Valor's voice became colder. You are requesting that I alter the Dominion's largest operation because of vessels that officially do not exist. Sarek did not look away. I am requesting that we prepare for the possibility that official reality has become inaccurate. The Chancellor ended the transmission without responding. No repositioning order came. 3 hours later, The first anomaly appeared behind the Dominion fleet. It was so small that the automated systems dismissed it. A maintenance drone aboard the supply carrier Endless Provision reported a fractional shift in local gravity. The change lasted 0.8 seconds, then vanished. 12 minutes later, a second drone detected the same phenomenon 600,000 kilometers away. Then a communications relay lost sight of a distant star for less than a heartbeat. The star had not dimmed. Something had passed in front of it. Subcommander Irix Sol brought the report to Admiral Serac. Irix was young by Varethi standards, barely 90 years old, but she possessed the rare instinct to distrust patterns that appeared too clean. The sensor system marked all three events as unrelated, she said. Do you agree? Serac asked. No. Why? Because the system wants them to be unrelated. Serac studied her. Explain. Our filters are designed to classify known drive effects, known debris, known radiation events, and known celestial motion. These readings match none of them, so the system discards them as noise. What do you believe they are? I believe something is moving behind us. Serac turned to the tactical wall. Display raw sensor input. Remove registry overlays. Several officers looked up in surprise. The fleet registry did more than provide ship locations. Its data shaped every tactical display. It identified friendly vessels, marked threats, calculated routes, and filtered insignificant readings. Removing it was like asking officers to navigate with their eyes closed. Or perhaps, Serac thought, like asking them to open their eyes for the first time. The tactical wall flickered. Thousands of polished symbols vanished. In their place appeared an ocean of raw information, unclassified heat, gravity fluctuations, starlight occlusions, electromagnetic shadows. The image was chaotic, ugly, and almost impossible to interpret. Irix moved beside the Admiral. There, she said. A cluster of stars disappeared for 3 seconds, then returned. Not all at once, in sequence. Something enormous was crossing the field. Serac ordered the display magnified. Another patch of starlight vanished. Then another. The darkness formed a line. No, not a line, a hull. The outline was nearly invisible, but Serac recognized its shape from intelligence briefings. Wide forward armor, 4 recessed engine housings, a central command spine, a Terran dreadnought. The object drifted beyond the Dominion's rear sensor perimeter, with every active system silenced. A designation appeared only after Irix manually compared the silhouette against archived records. TFS Dawnkeeper. The same vessel the registry listed as missing. Serac felt every sensory crest along his jaw rise. Distance? Irix checked the passive estimate. 800,000 kilometers. Behind us? Yes, Admiral. Another shadow crossed the stars beside it. Then another. The raw display filled with absences. Hundreds of shapes blocked distant light without producing standard drive signatures. Serac spoke slowly. How many? We cannot determine that yet. Estimate. At least 400. A second officer interrupted. Admiral, gravitational anomalies are appearing across the entire rear hemisphere. The number changed. 600, 900, 1500. Then the passive tracking software failed under the volume of unidentified contacts. Serac did not need it anymore. He understood. The human fleet had not retreated. It had not been destroyed. It had not become lost. Humanity had turned off the map, moved around the Dominion's battle line, and parked behind it. Not in scattered groups, not at emergency distance. The entire Terran expeditionary fleet held formation beyond the exposed rear of the Varethi Armada. Every human bow faced the Dominion's carriers and supply vessels. Every Dominion cannon faced the wrong direction. Serac looked at the registry display still glowing on a secondary panel. TFS Resolute, missing. TFS Vanguard, missing. TFS Indomitable, missing. TFS Dawnkeeper, missing. Outside the unquestioned law, those same warships waited in perfect silence. The fleet registry was not malfunctioning. It was reporting the only truth its creators had allowed it to understand. The human ships had left the system. They had not left the battlefield. A signal reached the unquestioned law through a tightly focused laser beam. No broadcast, no registry handshake, no traceable network path. A single line of light connected the human flagship to the Dominion command carrier. The bridge communications officer turned toward Sarek. "Admiral, we are receiving a direct transmission. Source? The human vessel Resolute. Place it on screen." Admiral Elena Ward appeared before him. She wore a dark uniform without ceremonial decoration. Her hair was streaked with silver, and her face carried the calm expression of someone who had already completed the dangerous part of her plan. "Admiral Val," she said, "I believe your registry may be experiencing difficulty locating us." Sarek studied her. "Your fleet is operating without registered propulsion." "Correct. That should be impossible. Many useful things begin that way." Sarek ignored the remark. "You have entered our rear security zone." "Your security zone extends across an international passage," Ward replied. "We have entered the space required to reopen it. You are threatening Dominion support vessels. No weapons are locked. You position 2,400 warships behind my fleet." "Yes." The simplicity of the answer unsettled him more than any threat could have. Sarek moved closer to the transmission display. "Why have you not fired?" Ward's expression did not change. "Because firing is not our objective." "Then state your objective." "Humanity will escort a relief convoy through the Nareth Passage. Your fleet will not interfere. Your inspection stations will release all confiscated civilian cargo. The passage will return to neutral administration. Those are demands. They are conditions for avoiding a battle neither of us needs." Sarek's voice lowered. "You believe your position guarantees victory." "No," Ward said. "I believe it gives both of us a chance to choose something better than victory." The answer forced Sarek into silence. Verethi doctrine allowed 3 responses to encirclement: attack, surrender, delay until reinforcement. It had no category for an enemy that achieved decisive advantage and then offered an exit, preserving both fleets. Ward continued. "Your forward batteries can turn, but not before our ships disable your support network. Your carriers cannot launch without exposing their bays. Your supply vessels are positioned between our fleet and yours. If combat begins, you may damage us, perhaps severely. But your formation will cease functioning within 17 minutes. Sarek looked toward Irix. She had already begun calculating. Her expression confirmed the human estimate. "Possibly 15, she said quietly. Ward heard her. "Our model assumed your crews would respond efficiently." Sarek returned his attention to the human admiral. "You have modeled our destruction. We modeled the cost of misunderstanding." The line sounded rehearsed, but Ward delivered it without pride. Sarek understood what she was giving him. Not mercy, clarity. Humanity had moved an entire fleet through undetectable space, taken the most valuable position in the engagement, and withheld fire. The act was not hesitation, it was control. A second signal appeared on the tactical display. Behind the Terran warships, 800 civilian freighters emerged from silent transit. Their running lights activated one after another. The darkness behind the Dominion fleet became a field of white, blue, and amber points. Medical carriers, fuel tankers, agricultural ships, atmospheric processors. Passenger transports. Humanity had not merely parked warships behind the enemy, it had brought the very convoy the Dominion intended to stop. The relief ships waited within the protection of the Terran formation, carrying enough supplies to sustain the frontier colonies for 8 months. Ward looked past Sarek, as if she could see through the transmission into the command deck itself. "The convoy departs in 10 minutes, she said. "Your fleet may remain where it is. We will pass behind you, curve around the outer moon, and enter the corridor from the west. You intend to sail through our formation? Beside it. And if Chancellor Valor orders us to fire, then your officers will decide whether a regulation written on the Capitol is worth the lives of everyone present." Sarek's jaw tightened. "You are asking my fleet to disobey the Dominion. I am asking your fleet not to begin a war over medicine." The transmission ended. For several seconds, no one spoke. Then Chancellor Valor appeared on every command screen in the fleet. His face was rigid with rage. "Admiral Sarek Val, the Chancellor said. "You will order an immediate attack." Sarek remained standing before the empty registry display. "The human fleet has achieved rear superiority. The registry lists no human vessels in your region. The registry is wrong. The registry cannot be wrong." Sarek looked toward the raw sensor wall, where thousands of human silhouettes blocked the stars. Then reality has become inconvenient. Valor's throat darkened. "Turn the fleet. Destroy the Terran warships before they can establish targeting locks. They already have targeting solutions. Then launch all strike craft. Our carriers face the wrong direction. Reorient them. That maneuver will expose their launch bays and collide with the inner support line." Valor slammed one hand against something outside the transmission frame. "You command the first encirclement fleet. Act like its admiral." Sarek's voice remained level. "I am." The Chancellor stared at him. "You were ordered to close the passage. That order assumed we controlled the engagement. We control 7,000 vessels, and the humans control where those vessels are facing." Across the command deck, Varethi officers remained motionless. Every word passed through the fleet network. Captains aboard 7,000 ships listened as the doctrine governing their civilization collided with the evidence outside their hulls. Chancellor Valor spoke again. "If you permit the convoy through, the Dominion will appear weak before every civilization in the registry." Sarek glanced at the administrative status panel. Human warships continued to display as missing. For 1,200 years, the Dominion had used that system to see everything. Now it saw nothing, and the galaxy was about to see the Dominion clearly. Sarek answered, "If I attack, the Dominion will lose its largest fleet because its leader preferred a database to his own admiral." Valor's eyes narrowed. "This is treason." "No, Chancellor. This is position." The words carried the full weight of Varethi doctrine. Sarek turned to his communications officer. "Open fleet-wide command." The officer obeyed. Every Dominion captain appeared as a small indicator across the control console. Sarek drew a slow breath. "All vessels will hold position. Weapons remain cold. Support groups will clear Corridor 7 for civilian transit. No ship will interfere with the human convoy." Valor shouted his name. Sarek cut the political channel. The decision moved through the fleet. For a moment, no vessel changed course. Then the logistics carrier Endless Provision fired its lateral thrusters. It moved 10 kilometers away from the transit lane. A fuel ship followed. Then a medical support vessel. Across the formation, Dominion captains began opening a corridor. Not because they loved humanity, not because they opposed their government, because they could see the human warships behind them, and because every experienced officer understood what Chancellor Valor refused to accept. The battle had already been decided. Humanity was merely allowing them to survive it. Aboard the Resolute, Captain Marcus Hale watched the Dominion formation separate. "Corridor 7 is opening," he reported. Admiral Ward released a breath she had held for longer than she cared to admit. "Any weapons activity?" "None." "Send the convoy." The first civilian vessel moved forward. It was the hospital carrier Mercy of Phobos, a broad white ship carrying 90,000 tons of medical equipment and replacement tissue printers. Its captain, Amina Solberg, had spent the silent transit with both hands wrapped around a metal cup of cold coffee. Now she guided her unarmed vessel between two lines of warships. On one side waited the Terran fleet. On the other floated the Dominion armada. Amina looked through the forward glass at the immense hull of a Varethi battleship. Its main cannons were large enough to split her vessel in half. The cannons remained still. Behind the Mercy of Phobos came the thermal freighter Borealis, carrying heat exchangers for Talos. Then the agricultural hauler Green Horizon. Then reactor ships, construction vessels, water carriers. 800 civilian ships entered the corridor. No one fired. Human destroyers moved alongside them with lights dark and weapons cold. Their presence did not feel like an invasion. It felt like a wall being carried through space. On the bridge of the unquestioned law, Admiral Sarek watched the convoy pass. Each ship displayed a civilian transponder. Each cargo record appeared on his screens. Medicine, food, air filters, habitat components. Nothing in the convoy justified the crisis his government had created. Sub-Commander Irix stood beside him. "The Terran dreadnoughts are moving," she said. Sarek looked toward the rear display. The human fleet had begun to divide. Half remained behind the Dominion formation. The other half curved around the exposed flank, maintaining enough distance to avoid triggering automated defenses. They were not tightening the encirclement. They were escorting their freighters. The Resolute passed closest to the unquestioned law. For several seconds, the two command ships floated less than 2,000 kilometers apart. Sarek could see the human vessel without magnification. Its hull was scarred from old battles. Armor plates overlapped like dark stone. Along its spine, narrow observation lights glowed to guide external crews. The ship looked nothing like a vanished object. It looked immovable. A narrow communication channel opened. Ward appeared again. "Thank you, Admiral," she said. "Do not mistake necessity for agreement," Sarek replied. "I would not insult you by doing so." Sarek considered her words. "Your fleet could have destroyed ours." "Yes. Would you have done it? If you fired on the convoy. And otherwise? We would have remained where the Registry could not find us until your government understood that closing the passage was no longer possible." Sarek looked toward the line of civilian vessels. "You built an invisible fleet to escort cargo ships. We built it because one day we knew someone would believe a map gave them ownership of space." Sarek's sensory crests lowered. "The doctrine of perfect position states that victory belongs to whoever knows where every force stands." Ward nodded. "It is a reasonable doctrine. You defeated it." "No, Admiral, we completed it." Sarek waited. Ward looked toward the stars behind her. "Position is not only where a ship is, it is what that ship is there to protect." The transmission closed. The convoy continued through the Nareth Passage. By the time the final freighter entered the corridor, the Dominion's political authority was already fracturing. Chancellor Vaylor ordered Sarek's arrest. No ship accepted the command. He ordered the Second Imperial Fleet to intercept the humans at the Eastern Passage exit. Its admiral refused to move without verified registry data. He demanded that the Record Ministry restore contact with the missing Terran vessels. The ministry could not restore what humanity had intentionally abandoned. Across the galaxy, governments watched the official registry list 2,400 human warships as missing, while independent observatories recorded those same vessels escorting a civilian convoy through the Dominion's blockade. The contradiction became impossible to conceal. For centuries, smaller civilizations had suspected the fleet registry gave the Dominion an unfair strategic advantage. Now they saw the deeper danger. The system did not merely observe reality, it encouraged its controllers to believe that nothing existed beyond what they could observe. Within 2 days, 19 governments disconnected their military fleets from the registry. Within a week, that number reached 63. The Dominion threatened sanctions. Trade councils ignored them. Engineers across known space began developing independent navigation systems. Ancient star charts returned to command academies. Civilian captains learned methods their grandparents had forgotten. The age of perfect observation ended not with an explosion, but with an empty screen. Admiral Sarek Val returned to the Dominion capital under guard. His trial lasted 6 hours. Chancellor Vaylor accused him of cowardice, insubordination, and surrendering strategic control to humanity. Sarek answered each accusation with the same evidence. The fleet survived. The passage remained open. No Dominion vessel had been destroyed. No Varethi family received a death notice. The court found him guilty. The Navy refused to enforce the sentence. 3 days later, 7,000 Varethi warships transmitted a joint declaration supporting Sarek's decision. It was the first organized defiance in Dominion history. Chancellor Vaylor resigned before the week ended. The government that replaced him suspended the doctrine of perfect position and opened negotiations over the future of the fleet registry. Admiral Elena Ward attended those negotiations. She did not arrive aboard the Resolute. She traveled on the Mercy of Phobos, the first civilian ship through the blockade. When Sarek asked why, Ward told him that the warship had made the meeting possible. But the hospital carrier explained why the meeting mattered. The fleet registry was eventually rebuilt under independent control. Participation became voluntary. Military drive profiles were encrypted. No government possessed access to the complete network. Humanity never disclosed the full design of the gradient drive, but Terran engineers shared limited versions with rescue services. Within 20 years, silent transit vessels could reach damaged ships without disturbing unstable regions of space. A technology created to hide warships saved more lives than it ever threatened. The Narith Passage remained open. At its western entrance, the Dominion constructed a memorial. It did not depict a Varethi admiral or a human dreadnought. It showed two fleets facing the same direction while civilian ships passed between them. Beneath the sculpture, a line had been carved in both languages. The map was empty. The stars were not. Generations later, cadets still studied the disappearance of the Terran Expeditionary Fleet. They learned how 2,400 warships severed themselves from the most advanced tracking system in the galaxy. They learned how human navigators crossed interstellar space using gravity, clocks, distant pulsars, and trust. They learned how the Dominion prepared to defeat a fleet advancing from the front, while that fleet silently descended behind it. Most of all, they learned what happened after humanity obtained the perfect firing position. The humans did not fire. They turned on the lights of 800 civilian ships. They opened a road through an armada. They carried medicine into the dark. The fleet registry had listed humanity's warships as missing, but humanity had known exactly where they were, between the enemy and the people who needed them.